So I'm talking about rhetoric and the digital age. So on page 158 of the article, I want to talk through the ways that Andrews structures this, because moving forward from this chapter, you're starting your own project. So I need you to be able to figure out which parts of articles that you read are rhetorical analysis example and which parts are rhetorical theory development. Okay, so one more time, rhetorical theory analysis and rhetorical theory development. So the top of this particular page, so we're on page 158, starts with what sort of textual practices follow from this encounter. First, we have speech. The words that are uttered during the interview, typically the preliminaries and post-preliminaries, are not recorded. We must recognize that speech of this kind does not happen in a vacuum. So then he keeps going, right? He starts talking about and applying the elements of his theory to this example of an interview that he's been using for page 157 and 158. So he's like, we have an interview, we have two people, and he really wants to showcase that the interviewer comes prepared. They come with the questions, they set the stage, they have a lot of the power in directing the direction that it goes. But he does, point out that yes, the interviewee can go off script, can provide an example or not, can answer really shortly or really abruptly. Like, they can do some stuff rhetorically to take back some of the power, to shift the direction, to find and answer whatever they want to within the questions that are being asked. Like, there's space for the two parties to work together to co-construct what is going on. And so he's arguing why that is multimodal. All of the different pieces that are occurring in that make it multimodal. And he's bringing in his idea of digitization, because he's like, even in, and this is like a traditional interview, right? So there would be a camera and there would be some version of film. Like, let's say that it was back in the days of 35 millimeter. That's still digitization. That is still a technology intervening or interfacing, because it's not really intervening. Like, we think of intervening like an intervention, like we're trying to make something better. It's interfacing. There's something in the middle of it happening and then us delivering it and delivering the message or sharing the message with the audience who are going to see it. And so what does that whole process look like, and where's that interfacing in the middle? Digitization. And all of that is rhetoric, right? That's the theory he's developing. So he's talking about the interview as a specific example of the theory that he's developing. So that whole first paragraph is example. He is rhetorically analyzing an interview situation, and he's pointing out which elements of it are digitization, which elements are multimodal. And then in the third paragraph, so the paragraph that starts in rhetorical terms, framing and textual practice allow a multiplicity of perspectives and possibility for communication. And then he really gets into the theory with the next sentence. And this is theory. So rhetorical theory development, not rhetorical analysis as example. Existing patterns of framing, or genres, in textual practice, the tendency to see text as monomodal, even though they are almost always multimodal, can be used, but a rhetorical framework allows for deployment and creation of text as appropriate to the social communicative situation. He's developing and adding on and supporting the theory that he's developing throughout this entire chapter. Furthermore, the media via which messages are transmitted play a part. He's really unpacking at this point, and he's explaining the theory that he's developing to ensure that his readers are on the same page. And so this is the part, the whole second half of that particular paragraph, where the word that I hear from students a lot is, oh, I don't want to put fluff in my essay. This is not fluff. This is what students think they're talking about when they say fluff, but this is literally explaining the message of the theory. And then the next paragraph, he continues with a different approach to explaining the theory to ensure that we have a rich understanding, because this is a huge umbrella that he's building. So he wants to make sure we have a rich enough understanding, and that he's pulling together all of the threads that he needs to So rhetorical analysis and rhetorically analyzing an example is one of the threads, unpacking the theory and explaining the individual elements aligned with the theory that he's been developing all along. So there's a connection between chapter 3 and a connection between chapter 12, requires significant numbers of paragraphs. And so I want you to be able to recognize what is the work of certain paragraphs as we're going through it. Okay, so another theory for the next one, this is the last paragraph on page 158. Rhetoric, therefore, provides an overarching framework for thinking about digitization and textual practices, framing, and social communicative acts. So at this point, because he is making a claim with that sentence that rhetoric is the overarching framework, he needs to have already set you up to understand and to buy into it so that he can explain it further. So the example that he used above and the specific words he used with genre and frames, and digitization and textual practices, all of those come back with the theory. So he used them for a reason, but then he now needs to talk about them in relation to the theory. He talked about them in relation to his example as part of the rhetorical analysis, but now he needs to have the theory conversation with them, which is what he then goes on to do. So this page ends with digitization increases the choices available to a rhetor and audience, and the increase in choice, once the framing of the encounter is made clear to all concerned, ought to maximize, now we're on to page 159, the communicative quality of interaction. So he's getting at, I need to define and talk through each of these terms so that you understand them as the overarching, and how using them in rhetorical analysis is helpful to get to the larger frame of rhetoric and how it's pulling all of these different pieces together. Okay, so I'm doing this so that as you move forward with projects in this class, you have a clearer understanding of what operates as rhetorical analysis as example and what talks about rhetorical theory development, because our focus in the final projects is rhetorical theory development. So you need to be able to tell the difference. If you have any questions about that, send me an email, come to office hours, or stop by my office hours. I'll see you online.